This is a journey of personal introspection that I wish to share with all of you. It is longer than my usual reflections because it requires time, attention, and a willingness to search. This Davar Torah was born from an ongoing personal quest, from questions that gradually emerge along my own spiritual path. We begin with words of Isaiah 55:6, which open the door to this reflection on how we approach Tisha B'Av. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Every year the same thing happens, almost without noticing. The calendar leads us once again toward these days. The month of Av begins and something changes within us. The music falls silent, celebrations are set aside, and we voluntarily give up small pleasures that normally form part of our everyday lives. All sages did not establish these customs in order to create an artificial sadness. They intended to guide us step by step toward an encounter. But this year, as I walked that path, one question began to trouble me. Where am I really walking toward? I knew I was approaching Tisha B'Av. I knew I would remember the destruction of the first and second Bet HaMikdash, the fall of Betar, the last stronghold of Jewish resistance against the Roman Empire, the decree against the generation of the spies, and so many other tragedies that Jewish history eventually came to associate with this very day. I knew the historical events, but knowing history is not the same as understanding it. Then another question arose, one that was even more unsettling. What am I actually mourning? I never saw the Bet HaMikdash. I never witnessed the cloud of the Shekinah. I never heard the songs of the Levites or watched the Kohen Gadol enter the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. So how can I mourn something I never knew? The Jewish people never wept merely for stones. So what have we truly lost? And even more importantly, what does Hashem expect us to discover as we journey toward this day? I did not want any easy answers. I did not want to repeat explanations I had already heard countless times. I needed understanding, so I did what every Jew has always done whenever questions become heavier than answers. I entered the Bet Midrash. But this was no ordinary Bet Midrash. It was the Bet Midrash of the generations. Around a great table sat the great teachers of Israel. Rashi was reviewing the Torah. The Rambam had his volumes of Halakha open before him. The Ramban sat contemplating the Mishkan. The Maharal of Prague remained silent as though gazing into the very soul of the world. Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim Lanschitz, the author of the Kli Yakar, held his commentary open before him. The Sfat Emet smiled with the serenity of one who knows how to seek what is hidden. The Baal Shem Tov looked upon creation as though everything within it was constantly pronouncing the name of Hashem. And Rav Kook looked toward the future with a hope that seemed to transcend time itself. No one was arguing. They were all studying the very same question. I stood silently for a few moments, not daring to interrupt the profound stillness that filled the room. Then Rashi lifted his eyes and asked, "What are you seeking?" I took a deep breath. I want to learn how to live Tisha B'Av. I don't want merely to fast or remember a list of national tragedies. I want to understand why Hashem gathered so many wounds of our people into a single day. I want to know what we are mourning, what we have lost, and what He expects from us. Rashi did not answer immediately. He opened the Torah to the book of Bamidbar and pointed to a night that had taken place centuries before the destruction of the temple. Tell me, when do you think Tisha B'Av really began? He asked. My mind immediately traveled to Jerusalem, broken walls, the sanctuary engulfed in flames. I could not answer. I did not want my ignorance to become evident before these great sages. But Rashi smiled. He knew I was looking too late in history. He read the account of the spies. 10 men returned, spreading fear. The people forgot Hashem's promises, and that night they wept. Then Rashi slowly closed the Torah. The destruction of the Beit HaMikdash was not the beginning, it was the consequence. The real wound was born the day fear spoke louder than trust. The day Israel believed more in the giants of Canaan than in the word of Hashem. His words left me speechless. I had always thought that Tisha B'Av began with a temple in flames. Rashi was taking me back many centuries earlier. Then he added one final teaching. Remember this. Every destruction begins long before the first stone falls. It begins when the heart ceases to trust. I lowered my eyes. I was no longer thinking about the generation of the wilderness. I was thinking about myself. How many times has fear spoken louder than my faith? How many times have I stared at my own giants while forgetting that Hashem still walks before me? I realized that Rashid had not simply explained the origin of Tisha B'Av. He had shown me the origin of every destruction. And while I remained silent, another question slowly emerged within me. If everything began when we stopped trusting, why did our sages establish a fast? What does Hashem expect to happen within us on this day? Before I could even ask, the Rambam slowly lifted his eyes. He gently closed the book before him and waited for a few moments, as though making sure that Rashi's words had found their place in my heart. Then he spoke. You now understand where the wound began. Now you must understand why we continue to remember it. I looked at him attentively. Many people believe that we fast in order to mourn the past, but fasting was never the goal. It is an awakening. Our sages did not establish this day in order to preserve sorrow, but to prevent the heart from falling asleep. As I wrote in the Chlok Taniot, whenever calamity strikes the Jewish people, fasting calls us to examine our ways and return to Hashem's through Teshuvah. If we think all this belongs only to the past, then the fast has lost its purpose. Then he looked directly into my eyes. What is the point of mourning the Beit HaMikdash if your own heart remains closed? I had no answer. Hashem does not need your tears. He desires your return. Those words struck me with all their force. I had come hoping to learn how to mourn. The Rambam was teaching me that tears only have value if they lead to Teshuvah. The Rambam remained silent for a few moments before adding one final thought. Every Tisha B'Av, Hashem asks the very same question he once asked Adam. Where are you? He's not asking where you are physically. He's asking where your heart is. Where have you placed your trust? Where do you seek security? Where have you allowed me to enter? At that moment I realized that for years I had been looking at Tisha B'Av as something that belonged to the past, while Hashem wanted me to experience it as something that speaks to the present, something that begins within. I raised my eyes. If the fast is meant to awaken me to what? The Rambam smiled gently and slowly turned toward the man seated beside him. The Ramban had remained silent all this time, one hand resting upon the book of Shemot. When he finally spoke, he did not begin by speaking about the temple. He spoke about redemption. Tell me, he asked, when did the exodus from Egypt truly come to an end? I answered confidently, when the Jewish people crossed the Red Sea. He shook his head gently. Then I said again, at Mount Sinai? He smiled once more. Not yet. He opened the final chapters of the book of Shemot and pointed to the moment when the cloud covered the Mishkan and the glory of Hashem filled it. Here, this is where redemption reaches its completion. My surprise must have shown on my face because he continued. Many people believe that redemption means leaving slavery behind, but a nation can leave Egypt and still feel orphaned. True redemption began when Hashem once again chose to dwell among his people. The Mishkan was not simply another structure. It was the continuation of Sinai. It was the visible testimony that the covenant had not ended. Suddenly I understood that the Bet HaMikdash was far more than the place where sacrifices were offered. It was the visible sign that God continued walking together with Israel. The Ramban slowly closed the book. Now ask yourself again the question that brought you here. What have you really lost? I lowered my head. I could no longer answer that we had lost a building. What we had truly lost was the constant awareness of living before Hashem. Perhaps the Bet HaMikdash was never the place where God lived. Perhaps it was the place that continually reminded humanity that God lives with us. And I realized that the real question was no longer, where is the Bet HaMikdash? But something infinitely more demanding. Am I living as though Hashem still walks among us? I could feel that I was beginning to understand why we mourn on Tisha B'Av. Yet one question still remained. If the Shekhinah filled the Mishkan, if the Bet HaMikdash made that presence visible, why did its destruction alter the course of history so profoundly? At that moment, the Maharal of Prague slowly lifted his head. He had remained silent throughout the entire conversation. When he finally spoke, he did not begin with an explanation. He began with a question. If the heart stops beating, what part of the body escapes suffering? None, I replied. Exactly, because the heart does not live for itself. It gives life for the entire body. He paused before continuing. Now tell me, what was the Bet HaMikdash? Having listened to the Ramban, I answered confidently. It was the place where the Shekinah dwelled among Israel. The Maharal smiled. Yes, but the answer is still too small. The Bet HaMikdash did not belong only to Israel. It was the spiritual heart of the entire world. It was the place where heaven and earth met. The place where humanity remembered that Hashem dwelled within his creation. When it was destroyed, it was not only Israel that lost its sanctuary. The whole world lost the place where the presence of God was made visible. A chill ran through me. For the first time, I understood that Tisha B'Av is not only about Jewish history, it is about the purpose of creation itself. The Maharal fell silent once more. Nothing more needed to be said. The question had already taken root in my heart. If the world lost its heart, how does it continue to beat? It was then that Sfat Emet slowly opened his eyes. He looked at me with a serenity that it's difficult to describe. You have spoken several times about losing the Shekinah. Do you really believe that God left? His question caught me completely off guard. Didn't we lose his presence when the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed? He gently shook his head. No, the Shekinah never abandoned Israel. What we lost was the ability to recognize his presence. Holiness did not disappear, it became hidden. While the Bet HaMikdash stood, it was enough simply to look toward Jerusalem. Now Hashem asks us a far deeper question. Will you still be able to find me when you can no longer point to a building? His words pierced my heart. I realized that exile is not simply living far from Jerusalem. The deepest exile begins when we are surrounded by the presence of Hashem and no longer perceive it. I look up. Then, if he's still here, where should I seek him? The Sfat Emet smiled, but did not answer. Instead, he turned toward the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov spoke with the simplicity of someone who speaks from lived experience. Everyone asks where to find Hashem. Let me ask you another question. Where do you allow him to be seen? I remained silent. He continued, do not confuse hiddenness with absence. There are moments when God reveals himself openly, and there are other moments when he waits for us to reveal his light. Seeking Hashem is not merely a matter of lifting your eyes toward heaven. It is living in such a way that those who encounter you can discover a reflection of his presence. Suddenly I realized that throughout the entire conversation, I had been asking one question. Where is God? Where is Hashem? Yet none of these masters had answered that question directly. Instead, each of them had transformed it into another one, far more demanding. Where do you allow God to become visible? That question lingered in the silence between us. Then Rav Kook slowly lifted his eyes. Until that moment he had listened without saying a word, and I sensed that he was about to gather all the voices around that table into a single unified answer. You have heard where destruction began. You understood why we fast. You have discovered that redemption reached its completion when the Shekinah came to dwell among Israel. You have learned that the Bet HaMikdash was the spiritual heart of the world, and you have come to understand that the presence of Hashem never disappeared. It is simply waiting to be recognized. He paused. Now I must ask you one final question. I prepared myself to answer, but before I could speak, he continued. If tomorrow the Bet HaMikdash were to descend from heaven, would our hearts be ready to receive it? No one spoke. The silence became more eloquent than any explanation. In that moment, I realized that all my questions had revolved around the same desire, to recover a place, But Rav Kook was showing me that Hashem has always desired something far deeper, not merely a building, a people capable of becoming his dwelling place. Then I remembered the words of the book of Shemot. Let them make me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell among them. It does not say I shall dwell in it. It says I shall dwell among them. Perhaps that had been the lesson toward which every one of these great teachers had been gently leading me. The Beit HaMikdash was never an end in itself. It was the place from which Hashem taught an entire nation how to live in such a way that His presence could dwell among them. The study session had come to an end. The teachers quietly returned to their books. No one spoke another word. I left the Bet Midrash. Jerusalem remained wrapped in the same silence that had greeted me when I entered. The stones were still there. The streets still breathed centuries of history, but the one who was no longer the same was me. I had entered searching for answers so that I might understand Tisha B'Av. I was living having understood that Hashem had never simply asked me to remember a tragedy. He was teaching me how to read it. Throughout this entire journey, I had believed that the great question was, what have we lost? Later I thought the question was, where is Hashem? Then I came to believe that I should ask, where can His presence dwell? But I eventually realized that even those questions were incomplete. The true question had been before me from the very beginning, hidden within the words of the prophet Isaiah. Seek the Lord while He may be found. Call upon Him while He is near. Suddenly I understood. I had not merely been trying to understand the meaning of Tisha B'Av. I had been trying to learn how to draw near Hashem, because I do not know how to draw near to Him without striving to understand His Torah. That is why I needed to sit beside Rashi, to listen to the Rambam, to allow the Ramban to guide me, to learn to see the world through the eyes of the Maral, to discover together with the Sfat Emet that the Shekhinah never abandoned this world, and to let the Baal Shem Tov and Rav Kook teach me that redemption begins long before a temple descends from heaven. It begins when a people once again choose to live in such a way that the presence of Hashem can be revealed among them. Then I finally understood. Tisha B'Av does not ask us how deeply we mourn a destroyed sanctuary. It asks whether we are living in a way that makes its return possible. Perhaps that is why we continue to fast after so many centuries. Not in order to preserve the memory of ancient ruins, but to keep ourselves from becoming accustomed to living without the Shekhinah. As I walked away from that Bet Midrash, I realized that my search had come to an end, because it had just begun. And perhaps this is the question that Hashem has been waiting for every generation to answer. Will we be the generation that lives in such a way that the Bet HaMikdash can once again be rebuilt?